Hello, parents, educators, and nerdy D&D fans. You have found our new home for Area of Effect, a talk show where we discuss how tabletop role-playing games benefit the whole family. We're currently in process of shifting all our old but golden episodes over to this new channel by posting a new episode every weekday until we catch back up to our new episodes. We would love your help getting this new channel up and running with a follow, share, or review. And thanks for joining us on our quest to bring more adventurers to the table.
This episode is brought to you by Facebook. So you were scrolling on Marketplace, and there it was, the bike you'd been searching for. You sent a message, and it turned out the seller was super chatty, kind of funny, and an avid cyclist. The next thing you know, you're in a cycling crew. Well, a community cycling group. The thing about Facebook, you might find more than what you're looking for. From a browse to a bike ride, this summer find more on Facebook.
This episode is brought to you by PayPal. You had plans for the last days of summer. And back-to-school shopping has its own plans. School supplies, dorm essentials, your list doesn't stop. Neither does the spending. But when you pay in full with PayPal, you can pay over time. No interest, no fees. Check out with PayPal and get back to summer. Subject to approval. Learn more at paypal.com/payinfor. PayPal Inc. NMLS 910457.
Kids Table Podcast.
Let's say you've got a kid in your life who's eager to tell stories, and you're eager to help them. So using what you know about D&D, fantasy narratives, and the ways that dice work, you sit down to create your own tabletop role-playing game, one that works for you and that kid. But is it really that easy? Actually, it can be. Today on the podcast, Allison talks with Ken, creator of D12 Adventures, about what it's like to write, refine, and balance new kids TTRPG. A conversation that will hopefully help you with that creative project that you've been itching to start.
Welcome to Area of Effect, a podcast by the Kids Table, where we discuss how tabletop RPGs benefit kids and answer your questions about playing TTRPGs with the kids at your own table.
This is your friendly, nerdy podcast host, Allison, and today I am joined by Ken of D12 Adventures, which is a kid-friendly, old-school solo gamebook series. Welcome, Ken.
Hi, Allison. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you, and excited that we were able to find a time somehow as busy parents with you in Germany and myself on the eastern coast of the United States. So it's
definitely.
I think it's quite late for you, and it's the middle of the day for me.
We'll try and make it work somehow.
So let's start with some tavern talk, have a little friendly chat as if we're by the fire in a fantasy world tavern, and get to know you a little bit. So my first question is, who introduced you to TTRPGs, and what about that experience gave you that spark of joy that kept you playing them?
Well, for me, it definitely was my dad, because he's always been kind of a storyteller by heart, I'd say. And it was more or less, I think it actually started with actual fighting fantasy books. He had like a very, very old German copy of, or German publication of Warlock of Firetop Mountain, and that was my little first introduction into, you create like a hero and a character, and then there's these back then, and fighting fantasy used like normal six-sided dice still, so there wasn't anything special about the dice.
Yeah.
But that was like my first introduction, and from there on it went out. One day he gave me the big red box of the first D&D edition that he had around still from the 80s, and this was in 2000, I want to say like 3, 4, something like that.
Okay.
That's where my
so
I was in like 4th grade, and that's when I started getting into these kind of books, and they soaked up all my free time back in my school days.
So you played mostly with your dad at home, or did you also play with friends in school?
Well, it was mostly, he introduced me before. I remember this because I only got into the whole Dungeons and Dragons aspect when we moved, and that was like when I was in second grade. But even before that, we had like rounds where he would like DM in a very, very loose basis. I can't even remember. We had like character sheets, and I don't think there was any ruling to anything, but we just like felt happy to more or less roll some dice and create characters. And we actually played a lot of Hero Quest back then. Before that, so probably Hero Quest was even before that, and that was my introduction before the game books came along, and then D&D came along. But with D&D is something that I always found fascinating. The first edition, the kind of player's handbook, I would assume it was the same in English, but the German version had more or less you would open the player's handbook and you would start reading it like a book, and it would be more or less of a kind of tutorial that you would just play like a solo adventure book. So it wasn't like that different at all for me coming from like a game book standpoint. I just started opening the player's handbook and they explain, okay, and then as stuff comes along, you start getting explained to how to attack monsters and whatnot, what hit points are and everything, and then more or less it expands upon there. And immediately I had like the urge to show one of my neighbor kids back in the day, and I taught him everything about, okay, so this is like D&D, this is how it works and stuff like. And then we went back and forth like designing dungeon maps on the old grid paper, and then just playing it more or less on one-off, DMing for each other with one character. And it wasn't that much that my dad, he more or less just ignited the spark and let me do my thing. But there were some times where he DM'd a session as well.
That's so cool. So was this like first edition, do you think?
Yeah, it definitely was the red box, so that was the first edition, and then he also had the blue box, which was like the advanced. So I think it was already like AD&D back then. There was also a greenish teal kind of box as well, and stuff started becoming really complicated then, because the red stuff was basically just grid paper, and you draw your maps and roll dice, and that's about it. And then they start with they basically start to tell you about overworld travel, not just having a dungeon for dungeon for dungeon. And that's where it started becoming complicated. We kept it to the dungeons when we were kids. I basically I remember that for Christmas I got the player's handbook and GM handbook for the guide for the third edition, and it had like very, very fancy drawings and pictures that I liked, but the rules were kind of a little bit too, it started getting too complicated for what I was used to. And that's basically for me that D&D died for a long period after that time for me, and I only started it picking back up when I was basically when it was in one of the companies I was working with at the time. A couple of colleagues were like, hey, we should play D&D. It's the big new thing. Is, what do you mean D&D? I played like the old first edition. Are they playing that? What edition are they even on? And then I read up on everything, and it was already 5th edition was going strong. Critical Role was already big and stuff. Now, and I read into 5th edition. I was like, this is actually pretty cool and pretty accessible as well, like compared to the 3rd edition rule books that I was reading back then. So that was something that what makes 5th edition great is just that it's so damn accessible.
Yeah, they definitely like were getting more and more and more complicated, and then they like pulled back a little bit to make it more accessible. Yeah, I started with Pathfinder and then went to 5e, so it was,
and I read that Pathfinder only exists because everybody kind of hated a little bit how complicated 4th edition was.
Yeah, I believe it. That makes a lot of sense. So share with our listeners more about what is D12 Adventures Trials of the Mad Mage, and what inspired you to create it.
Well, it's more or less, I had this idea roaming in my mind a little bit about how these like old school game books kind of ignited my love for the whole tabletop role-playing genre. And It has been like on my desk as a little side project for the last, yeah, probably year, 1.5 years or so, just like sparingly finding some ideas, noting stuff down, but actually getting to work for maybe the past half year or so. But more or less D12 Adventures, I wanted to create something for especially very young children, and of course I have like a very small daughter. She's only about 2 now, and she's still too young. But the ultimate goal is to have like a nice little game book that I can like hand her and be like, hey, you want to play this on your own or with me when she's old enough, to get her like excited for this kind of style of playing, and also of just playing make believe, so to speak, in a very, very cool way. So it's more or less an idea of being a pocket sized little game book system for kids. Maybe I'm still unsure about the age, but I'm aiming for like maybe 8 to 12, which is still very, very broad. But yeah, I wanted to be inspired by like this old school kind of flavor of these earlier 80s fantasy books. Because while D&D 5th edition is like very, very accessible, it's also very, very modern. And I wanted to really probably just touch roots with my childhood back then as well, because even though I wasn't born in the 80s, that kind of like 80s high fantasy adventure is what got me going in the first place. But yeah,
I think there's definitely a lot of people that are looking for that feel. You know, their parents now, but they in the 80s or 90s like remember playing that style of game, and it's very nostalgic.
Yeah, and the ultimate goal would be, you know, that it doesn't make a difference if the kid wants to, it should be able to play it by itself, or you know, they can take mom or dad or whoever, because it should also work for when a parent reads it to them, and then the child makes the decision, and to keep the system in itself simple. And that's also why I wanted it to be like a one die system, and that's more or less, that was the core concept ruling wise. I had this idea of, you know, the D20 is the epiphany of like role-playing games and Dungeons and Dragons. You know, it's like the shape and everything you immediately think about when you see it. And I wanted to be like, what's the easy kid version of a D20, and I was like, a D12 is actually kind of nice and fitting. So and that's why I started
like a
with
D12. I don't know why.
Yeah, the D12 is like
nice
very
shape.
like, well, yeah, it's very beautiful. It's very thing, and you seldomly get to roll it even in D&D 5th edition.
true.
Like it's a very, very underused die in my opinion. So I wanted to give the D12 a little love. It's like a little immature D20. So that's why also, yeah, if you so a parent sees, okay, so what's you know what a D20 is, you know, Dungeons and Dragons, what's D12 Adventures, you immediately have it in the name. You immediately see, okay, maybe this is aimed for, you know, a younger generation.
Yeah, and there's something about it, actually, I hadn't really quite made, I think this was subliminally in my brain. I hadn't realized this connection. It reminds me of a soccer ball because it's made of the pentagons, right? Or
yeah, it's like a Dota
shape?
No, a dodecahedron is, I think, is that a D20? I can't remember, but it's like it's like a
Well, we
very,
can look it
very,
up.
it looks like a
Yes,
still
it's a
simplistic but a little
dodecahedron.
complicated.
That's great. So just for our audience to get to know you a little bit more, this is like out of left field, what are some other hobbies that interest you that are beyond TTRPGs?
Well, I'm a big gamer, so my love for TTRPGs kind of just grew into video gaming in general, and I also work in the games industry. I'm a big metalhead. I like to make music. I have a band that I play in. I like to cook. That's something like, since my little one was born, you know, try to eat healthy and everything, and cook some good stuff at home. So that's something I
What do you like to
discovered
cook?
recently, in recent years. Yeah. Well, it's I myself am like a vegetarian, but I always kind of try to balance because mom isn't vegetarian, and I want to give the little one all the nutrients she needs. But we like to cook like anything Asian as well in our house, just because Asian cuisine is a very healthy cuisine, and there's lots of veggies in there, lots of simple carbohydrates and stuff. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, good. And shout out your band name in case people want to look it up.
Well, if you're into like kind of groove metal or thrash metal, you can look up Karmament. That's my band's name. We're a German groove metal band from Nuremberg, Germany.
Karmament is an awesome name.
Yeah, in English lyrics, we don't do anything in German. We just say we're a German metal band because we're from Germany. That's why.
Yeah.
But people usually get that wrong. Yeah, the nice thing is with Karmament, everybody's like, so we like to ask people, what do you think that name is like made of for you? Because we've heard the weirdest stuff, especially from like non-English speakers. That's also very interesting. Yeah.
So to me, it's like karma and armament.
Yes, exactly. That's the
Right?
that's
okay.
the idea. And I'm the only like native speaker in my band. So I was like, that's the thing. That's gonna be the concept of it, you
Okay.
know. But it was like, how the hell what about like testament or stuff like that? So
Oh, okay. Interesting.
they just take the karma and then the ment from very
Yeah.
different. Germans make up a lot of words or find lots of words that end with ment.
That's awesome. It sounds like you're just creative guy all around. Creative with your cooking,
yeah.
creative with music, creative with making games.
Yeah, like when I sit down for too long, I start making stuff up.
That's great.
It just happens.
Yeah. Well, let's get to the heart of the topic today. We wanted to talk about the creative process for writing kids' TTRPGs. And I know that a
Yeah.
lot of our listeners are also creators or kind of dabble in this, even if it's just writing for their own kids at home or if they run like an after-school club or something like that. So
Yeah.
let's talk about the creative writing process. What has been the hardest part of the process so far, or multiple hard things?
I think for me, and I think it's like a personal thing because I'm very I'm like a very more or less adult writer kind of guy. So I for example, I love like horror and that kind of stuff in that setting, and that's also why it works for the metal band and things, or also
Yeah.
for like in my job, but like I naturally lean into these kind of themes. So it's been like a real challenge to just pivot back and try to view things from like the eyes of a child, so to speak, because I'm constantly like checking myself. Is this too spooky, or is it too scary, or is it because I want to have it, be maybe thrilling a bit, but or is it too dark and stuff like that. So there's also one section which I'm still not sure about, even in the demo that people can play in the playtest manuscript. But it's been more or less mostly I keep like checking myself every now and then, because I mean if you look at these earlier game books and stuff, and especially because it goes great with of course the illustrations from these great artists as well, they're like creepy at times. And it's like, and that's maybe also why I was burned early as a child by these books, and why I lean into this. So
Desensitized
I kind of want
to it, maybe. Yeah.
Well, I think it's just I'm trying to like capture the vibe and thinking about what makes that kind of old school charm and vibe. Usually they are like pretty gritty at times, but at the same time you wanna keep it, kid friendly. And then I think about, well, but back then these things were considered kind of kid friendly, or people at least were playing them. Kids were playing them. Maybe they weren't advertised for kids. Back then it was all the Satanic Panic and whatnot in the 80s, but that has also been like left a mark on the genre back then as a whole. But yeah, I would say that's like the most difficult thing to write in a good, like, quality way. But then I like find myself, because I've been working in journalism during my days at university as well. So I'm like, usually I'm very proud of if I can use fancy words and whatnot, but like, it's not something that you need for children. It needs to be clear. It needs to be concise. You need short sentences. So it's more of I kept falling back on the show, don't tell, like that kind of method. When I want to describe something, I just describe what they see. And what they always like do in these kind of game books, it's always like, you do this, you do that, you see this, kind of like this GM kind of style of talk that happens. So that really, really helps.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think from an American's perspective, the German children's books have a reputation in America for being especially dark and horror-centric, right? Like the Brothers Grimm style of fairy tales.
Yeah, exactly. That's like from the fairy the fairy tales.
Yeah. When Disney gets a hold of it, they really soften it, right? It's so much, they get rid of most of the really creepy stuff. So I think kids can be shocked when they read the true fairy tale for the first time. That inspires different
that's true. German fairy tales are really creepy. It's the same from, like, it's not only German, it's the whole, like, also Eastern European, Polish and Czech kind of. They all have these same things. And there was also, like, there was this thing about what they call the der Suppenkasper, which was also like, I keep getting reminded of that. It's not a fairy tale, but it was a rhyme that children's in
children's
Germany
poetry, like
it's like a children's poetry, and it's about like a little boy who's very, very happy, and he's not not he always says, ich esse meine Suppe nicht. He's not eating his soup. And he does that until he, like, because he's this healthy fat little boy, and he just, like, keeps losing weight and weight and weight. And more or less, it's after 5 days he just dies. That's how the whole poem ends.
And the moral of the story is, kids, you better eat your soup.
The moral of the story, you better eat your soup or else you'll die. So that's how German fairy tales work.
Yeah, the old school style of parenting is a little bit like scare them into following the rules, right? Like, this is what could happen if you don't listen to your mom and dad when they say eat your soup.
And that's also
I'm reminded of Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah, exactly.
Very
one of just
famous,
these classical
like, fairy
tales.
tale. Yeah, and it's like used so often with small children, but when you really think about how horrifying that is, first of all, that the, like, parents abandoned the children in the woods, and then this witch wants to eat them, and then, like, there's a whole series of
and then they just shove in the witch and watch her burn and shriek and
kick her in the fire and watch her burn. Like, oh my gosh, is this really a children's story? But
it's really
maybe
brutal.
Children used to be tougher than they are now.
And now it's time for a break. When we come back, Ken will reminisce on memories of seeing Lord of the Rings for the first time as a child.
So I'm curious, what was your first experience with peril in fantasy content, and how do you plan to address this as a father?
If I think about it, I'm like a big, of course, Lord of the Rings fan, and I was like, I am yearning for the day that I will get to watch Lord of the Rings with my little one. And it's like, when I think about how old was I when I saw Fellowship of the Ring, because it's like, I remember going into the cinema when Return of the King came out, and I was probably, for Fellowship of the Ring, I was like 8 or so, and officially I think it was labeled in Germany to be viewable by an audience of like 12 plus. We have like FSK 12. But yeah, I think I saw it with 8. I mean, I'm still fine, I think, at least.
Yeah.
I still love Lord of the Rings.
I think that's a good point, that there's not necessarily an age that is like a blanket statement that's always going to work, right?
Yeah.
Like every kid
Yeah.
8 and up is going to be fine. Every kid under is not going to be fine, because it really depends on the child. Like there are some kids that can really handle that kind of stuff and
Yeah.
already know how to enjoy that little thrill or that little adrenaline of suspense.
And that's also the thing about
kids that don't.
parenting. Like you as a parent, I think you know best, if it's good for your child or not. Because yeah, I do remember also with my dad used to, when we were little, we had these like almost lavish birthday parties that were like themed costume parties or whatnot, and he would like
fun.
even get once or twice get like his friends to like come and more or less this was like before cosplaying was big.
Yeah.
But get to like come all dressed up and whatnot, and of course there were like many children, me included, who were like, oh, so cool and whatnot, but there's always this one or two kids who are like, they might be scared and whatnot, and it's just different for everybody. Yeah,
My girls are 5 and 7 and tend to be more scaredy cat, and so I've also been trying to decide, when can I introduce them to Star Wars, which is like my favorite thing, or even Harry Potter, because it's funny how you kind of forget those moments that could be terrifying to a kid until you're like watching it with a kid and you're like, oh, I forgot about this content.
Harry Potter is a great like example, because I also remember like when the Sorcerer's Stone came to the movies, we went to the movies and it was just like this magical, Christmas movie and whatnot. But I remember that my dad saw it first and then came back home and was like, yeah, we can watch it. There's like 2 scenes that he's going to warn us about that might be scary. And for mostly for my sister, I was in there the whole movie just waiting for those scenes. But because it was in the forbidden section with that screaming book that comes out of nowhere. There was in the first movie, and of course like the whole Voldemort double face
with the
head
unicorn
CGI
and the
thing.
face on his head. Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, like, if you watch the movies like front to back, you can really see that as the audience that was first like wowed, like all these children. And you see it in the actors, of course, they all age and they get older, and the movies start to become darker and darker and darker. I mean, if you watch the last movie and the first movie, like the whole color palette is completely different. It already started with,
even
I think,
the intro screen.
Exactly, and the music and whatnot. That was, I remember with the third movie, The Prisoner of Azkaban, it really started taking this first dark turn with the Dementors and whatnot, and they even started making this from the main theme. They had like a little, oh god, I don't know how you call it in English. There's like this, major and minor. Dur and Moll is what we call it in German. There's like this one note which is usually a major, and John Williams changed it to a minor, and it still works, but it gets this little creepy aspect, which was just such a chef's kiss to the whole and fitting the theme of the movie.
So obviously choosing how much peril is exciting versus terrifying is a difficult balance. What about like even just the gameplay mechanics? Like you had mentioned, is it too easy? Is it too hard? What are some other difficulties as you're creating this?
Well, yeah, I wanted to. That was the thing. Like I was definitely set on a 1 die system, so we're just gonna take a D12, and I want the kids to be able to basically just, you need a D12 and a sheet of paper and a pen, and that's all you need to like play the game. You could even like do it so that, in the publication, like all of these game books, they had like the character sheet and everything on the back, and maybe just use that with like a pencil and erase it again, or do a photocopy back then of the book, and that would work easy as well. But I wanted to give like the kind of whole vibe of variety. I wanted to also have, I thought about because you need to think about how is combat going to work, and what do you do in terms of like, are there going to be like skill checks or whatnot, like we know from Dungeons and Dragons. So and that's why I decided on using just like 4 simple stats, which are like courage, cleverness, fitness, and kindness. And they also tie into, at the same time, into the combat system, of course. So you would have like your health, which is like your 10 plus whatever your fitness is. And I also wanted to go away from the whole D&D aspect from you have a number and that is your stat and that determines a bonus that you get on the roll. I wanted to be able to, if you roll something for your cleverness and then you have a number and that is the number you're always going to use. So to basically keep it simple and to add to whatever you roll. So those were like aspects to keep it simple. Yeah.
You create your whole character with just 4 rolls, right? Just rolling for each stat, and
Yeah.
that's it.
Basically, yeah. And that was also a very I did add a little a grace rule in there. So more or less, if all of your stats add up and are like under a certain one, then you get to re-roll again.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's more or less just you do this old school hardcore roll your stat, or more or less you don't roll the stat necessarily, but you can like just roll 4 numbers and then assign them as you see fit. And that's how you basically create your character. And that's also why I wanted to, let's say if I create like an encounter or a challenge, that there would always be, no matter if you would roll if you have like a high courage and a low cleverness or whatnot, maybe that challenge would like offer both paths, as you could use like your cleverness and go that route or your courage and go that route. And I didn't want to necessarily punish like a player for having a low stat, so they could just maybe fall back to something else. And then it also like they have a different paragraph to read, of course. So it's more work for me as a writer, of course. But yeah, those are like things to just keep it simple and more or less put in the work to have like all of these little elements be one part of like one system. And that's why also you don't have combat like as a separate part, but more or less also the like depending on like the monster or enemy that you might be fighting, they when they attack you, they don't necessarily like in the old school books it's always your constitution or fitness or whatever, but no, maybe they do like psychic stuff and they roll against your cleverness
cool.
and whatnot. So that also brings up more variety as well.
I love that. And your game is a choose your own adventure style of game.
Yeah.
So that makes it a lot more complicated because you have to account for any decision that anybody would make and follow all those trains of decisions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's been really interesting. It's been like long and tedious to get started, but now I'm kind of like in my flow after like finding the tools to work with, because I use Twine to write like branching narratives, and I see how basically each node would be like a paragraph, and I see where does a paragraph lead. Are there any dead ends or whatnot that I need to like still fill out, or where do I circle back and things like that. It really helps with that. And you can also assign like key colors. For example, this is a key color, things like this is a battle, this is like a skill check or whatever. You can find a quest item here just to also space it out a little bit.
Yeah, that visual would help a lot. That's the website is just called Twine.
It's a software actually, yeah. But I think if you
okay.
just search for Twine, then you can find it. It's like a software that you just run locally, and you basically create your text inside these nodes, and then once you're more or less finished, you can like export the whole thing into like a doc or whatnot, and that basically helps with that.
So what kind of feedback have you heard or experienced yourself from kids playing this game and like benefiting from it, or the experiences that they've had?
Well, the nice thing is I had a little bit of different feedback in terms of there were Some where only the kid was playing it and the parent filled out the feedback afterwards, but most of them actually played it together, which I kind of liked. And what more or less the I had to do like a big revamp in terms of difficulty, because the first version or the first early versions, they were a bit too easy. Right now I'm at like the 0.4 version, so already like a fourth iteration, but I think it was in the third iteration after the first two I already like switched more or less to kind of tighten a little bit the target numbers that you roll against, because at the in the first version they were all a little bit too, it was too easy. So if you rolled like a very high character, then you would just breeze through everything, and you would have these times where I don't need to roll. I have like a courage of 12, so I just like I succeed. And yeah, it's been more or less a little challenge in the beginning to kind of like increase the difficulty, so I would force a roll, but also not keep that swinginess in check. And that's where the D12 helps a lot as well. Because with the D20, you have like from 1 to 20, it's just this huge spectrum of where you can land on. And it would never work in this kind of sense that you roll a straight D20 and that's going to be your attribute and you use that for everything. But with the D12, it kind of works. So the big change that I made was to more or less, when you roll your character, you roll them and then you have that number and round up. Because so the best thing that you can roll right now would be like a 6 then for something. Okay. So you are always forced to roll on a roll. And that's something that I completely breezed by, because in my playtest I never got that lucky to roll like a high character. But that's like a tip that I can give. Play your own prototypes with like low level and high level characters, so you know if everything still works. You have to account for the extremes.
Yeah, and you're right that like succeeding there is great, but you lose the satisfaction if you always succeed or you're guaranteed to succeed, right? The satisfaction comes from the challenge.
Exactly, and that's why it was very important to me to like keeping failure fun as well. So losing a roll should never mean that it's like the end of a story. It basically just changes it, and there are points where, I don't know, if you lose roll, maybe you still get to go forward, but you need to take damage or you lose an item. So there's always like a downside to it. But you should never like have to just start from the beginning or whatever because you lost something or made a wrong choice somewhere along the way. And that's like every choice should feel meaningful, even if it like costs you a little bit of something. And that's also where like these resources that I've introduced as well come in. You can like offer up maybe at certain times like a torch or a ration and use that to gain what I call basically what is like the advantage and disadvantage system. What I just call edge and risk is more or less when you get to roll 2 die and then either take the better one or the lower one. And you can also
at the cost of 1 resource.
Yeah, at the cost of 1 resource. Only when the book allows for it. You can't do it any time, but it's like because I write it in there, so it basically makes sense. You can like, I don't know, you use a ration to distract the monster or whatnot, and then you become you get edge on a roll for a check that's needed after or to get away and things like that.
And if you do lose all your hit points, what's the mechanic for like death saves or resurrection?
Yeah, I mean, more or less what I wanted to do is like the Pokemon system of all the Pokemon have been defeated, so you faint, and then you I introduce more or less checkpoints in terms of these like campfires. So there's like literal campfires worked in, at least in this first book into like the story, where you have this big opening section in the playtest manuscript as well, where there's like a campfire. It's introduced to you, and then you like mark it down like this is my current campfire paragraph. So if I ever faint or whatever and don't have any health left, you can come back to this point. And what I do is basically give the player a choice of, because I more or less I make a difference between quest items and just normal, like your resource items like torches and rations and whatnot. And these quest items are things that maybe other people or NPCs, if you want to call it that, can give you along your journey. Maybe you succeed in a role, they give you a little token of appreciation, and later in the story it's going to ask you, do you by any chance have this? Then you can immediately go to this section and you'll get a different outcome maybe on a whole encounter. And and what basically happens, if you would more or less lose all of your health, then you would have to, if you have any of these quest items, you strike one of them off. You can pick and choose, because ideally you don't know what they do yet, because that point hasn't come on in the story so far. But you can either strike off one of those or two of your rations. And I think I would have to look up the rules. If you don't have anything to strike off, then you get to respawn for free.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's never like, it's over now, go home, start at page 1 again.
Well, it sounds really exciting, and it sounds like you have thought of everything that I can think of, but I love that you're doing this playtesting round to just make sure that everything is working well. I'm sure there are some people in our audience who will want to help with the playtesting process here. So how can our listeners find your game that can be playtested?
So since this is more or less just a little passion project of mine, I don't have any Kickstarter or a website, or I am still far from that. I don't even know if I ever want to do a Kickstarter or whatnot. My idea would be to get playtest feedback, to get the system and everything to a level that I'm happy with it, and then finish writing the first book or the story, the adventure, so to speak, and then maybe hit up a publisher or whatnot. But for now, it's hosted on my itch.io page. And that's where I write little blog entries whenever I do upload a new version of it. But right now I'm at a version that has this new tighter difficulty tied in, that I keep fixing typos and whatnot, and because I started updating the whole playtest for the first week every second day or so, and I'm okay, I think I'm gonna just start gathering stuff first.
Yeah.
And then I haven't updated it in a while, because I'm still waiting for feedback on this particular version. And until then, I just keep narrowing down a little bit more of the adventure, the content and the writing in itself. But yeah, on itch.io, so there's 2 links there. There's the download, of course, of the PDF, so you can either play it digitally, or you can even print it out. I think one of the playtesters even said they printed out the whole thing, and I'm oh god, no.
Wow.
Because I think it's already pretty long, and it's it's gonna be outdated the moment that last page is printed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
save the paper, don't print it, just play it digitally.
Yeah.
It works great on tablets, is what the playtesters have said. So if you have a tablet, especially for children, or a co-parenting play, whatever, that works really, really well. And the second link is to a Google survey that I just host on my Google, where you can put in anything from the age of the player, if the kid has played it by themselves, if parents have helped them, and then what paragraph or moment did they like. There's a bunch of different questions in there, and there's even the possibility, if people want to, there's an optional last question if they want to just leave their email address. I've already have a few. I don't know what I'm going to do with them yet. If I'm going to set up a newsletter, I have more or less maybe have that in my mind, to just set up a newsletter to send out a little ping hey, there's a new version on itch.io, so
Yeah.
go grab it.
Great. Well, thanks for joining me today, Ken. It's been a real pleasure to get to know you and learn about your game. I think it sounds amazing.
Thank you for having me and for the opportunity to just talk about the idea a little bit.
Yeah, it's great. I hope that our listeners will go check that out, do a little playtest, and don't forget to take that survey at the end to help Ken continue to refine and improve the game.
A lot of people download it, look at it, play it, I don't know, but not a lot actually do the survey. It's not that long.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Area of Effect. Check out our original actual play D&D show with kids at the table on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Be a part of the ongoing conversation by emailing questions at thekidstablednd.com. Find resources to bring adventure to your own table at thekidstablednd.com/shop and join our quest to introduce more kids to D&D at patreon.com/thekidstablednd. Because when kids are at the table, everyone wins.